The philosophers in their writings have expressed themselves in many different, but always enigmatic ways. They bequeath to us a science noble among all, but completely veiled for us by their cloudy words, entirely hidden beneath an impenetrable veil. And yet they were right to do so. Therefore, I implore you to exercise your mind with perseverance on these 7 chapters, which contain the art of transmuting metals, without having to worry about the writings of other philosophers. Replay often in your mind their beginning, middle, and end, and you will find in them inventions so subtle that your soul will be filled with joy. Chapter 1. Definitions of Alchemy. In some ancient manuscripts, there are several definitions of this art which it is important to discuss here. Hermes says, "Alchemy is the immutable science which works on bodies with the aid of theory and experience, and which, by a natural conjunction, transforms them into a more precious higher species." Another philosopher has says, "Alchemy teaches how to transmute any kind of metal into another, with the help of a particular medicine, as can be seen from the numerous writings of the philosophers. That is why I say, alchemy is the science which teaches to prepare a certain medicine or elixir, which being projected on the imperfect metals, gives them perfection in the very moment of the projection." Chapter 2. Of the natural principles and generation of metals. First, note that the principles of metals are mercury and sulfur. These 2 principles have given rise to all metals and minerals, of which there are many different species. I also say that nature has always aimed and constantly strives for perfection, for gold. But as a result of various accidents that hinder its progress, metallic varieties are born, as is clearly explained by several philosophers. According to the purity or the impurity of the 2 component principles, that is to say of sulfur and mercury, perfect or imperfect metals are produced, which are gold, silver, tin, lead, copper, and iron. Now piously collect these teachings on the nature of metals, on their purity or impurity, their poverty or richness and principles. The nature of gold is a perfect body composed of a pure, fixed and brilliant red mercury, and a pure and fixed, red incombustible sulfur. Gold is perfect. The nature of silver is a pure and almost perfect body, composed of a pure and almost fixed brilliant white mercury. Its sulfur has the same qualities. Silver just needs a little more fixity, color, and weight. The nature of tin is a pure imperfect body, composed of a pure mercury, fixed and volatile, brilliant, white on the outside, red on the inside. Its sulfur has the same qualities. The tin only needs to be a little more cooked and digested. The nature of lead is an impure and imperfect body, composed of an impure and terrestrial mercury, slightly white on the outside, red on the inside. Its sulfur is similar and more combustible. Lead lacks purity, fixity, and color, since it is not cooked enough. The nature of copper is an impure and imperfect metal, composed of an impure, terrestrial, and combustible, red mercury. The same for its sulfur. Copper lacks fixity, purity, and weight. It contains too much impure color and incombustible earthy parts. The nature of iron is an impure, imperfect body, composed of a very fixed impure mercury, containing combustible earthy parts, white and red, but without luster. It lacks fusibility, purity, and weight. It contains too much impure fixed sulfur and combustible earthy parts. Any alchemist must take into account the above. Chapter 3. From which gold must extract the next matter of the elixir. In the foregoing, we have sufficiently determined the genesis of perfect and imperfect metals. It follows from the preceding chapters that all metals are composed of mercury and sulfur, that the impurity and imperfection of the components are found in the compound. As we can only add to metals substances drawn from themselves, it follows that no foreign matter can be of use to us, but that anything composed of the 2 principles is sufficient to improve and even transmute metals. It is very surprising to see people, however skillful, working on animals, which constitute a very distant matter, whereas they have at hand a sufficiently close matter to minerals. It is not impossible that a philosopher place the work in these distant matters, but it is by allegory that he will have done so. All metals are composed of 2 principles, and nothing can attach itself to them, unite with them, or transform them, unless it is itself composed of both principles. This is how reasoning forces us to take mercury and sulfur as the matter of our stone. Mercury and sulfur alone cannot engender metals, but by their union, they give birth to various metals and numerous minerals. So it is obvious that our stone must be born from these two principles. Our last secret is very precious and very hidden, which is the mineral matter, next among all, that we should directly operate on. We are forced to choose carefully. Suppose first that we derive our matter from plants, grasses, trees, and everything that grows from the earth. It will be necessary to extract the mercury and the sulfur from it by a long cooking process, which we reject, since nature offers us ready-made mercury and sulfur. If we had chosen animals, we would have to work on human blood, hair, urine, excrement, hen's eggs, or in short everything that can be extracted from animals. Here again, we would have to extract mercury and sulfur by cooking. We reject these operations for our first reason. If we had chosen mixed minerals, such as the various species of magnesia, marcasites, tudies, cuproses, vitriols, or alums, borax, salts, etc., we would likewise have to extract mercury and sulfur by cooking, which we reject for the same reasons as above. If we were to choose one of the 7 spirits as mercury alone, or sulfur alone, or mercury and one of the 2 sulfurs, or quicksilver or orpiment, or yellow and red arsenic, we could not perfect them, because nature only perfects the determined mixture of the 2 principles. We cannot do better than nature, and we would have to extract sulfur and mercury from bodies, which we reject as above. Finally, if we took the 2 principles themselves, we would have to mix them in some fixed proportion, unknown to the human mind, and then cook them until they were coagulated into a solid mass. This is why we reject the idea of taking the 2 separate principles, that is to say sulfur and mercury, because we do not know their proportion, and we will find bodies in which the 2 principles are united in right proportions, coagulated and conjoined according to the rules. Hide this secret well. Gold is a perfect and male body without superfluity or poverty. If he perfected the imperfect metals melted with him, it would be the red elixir. Silver too is an almost perfect and female body, and if by mere fusion it made imperfect metals almost perfect, it would be the white elixir. What is not and what cannot be, because these bodies are perfect in only one degree. If their perfection were communicable to the imperfect metals, the latter would not be perfected, and it would be the perfect metals that would be defiled by contact with the imperfect. But if they were more than perfect, double, quadruple, hundredfold, etc., then they could perfect the imperfect. Nature always operates simply, that is why perfection is simple in them, indivisible and non-transferable. They could not enter into the composition of the stone, as ferments, to shorten the work. They would in fact be reduced to their elements, the sum of the volatile exceeding the sum of the fixed. And because gold is a perfect body composed of a red, shining mercury, and a similar sulfur, we will not take it as the matter of the stone for the red elixir, because it is too simply perfect. Without subtle perfection, it is too well cooked and naturally digested, and we can hardly work it with our artificial fire, and the same goes for silver. When nature perfects something, it doesn't know how to purify it, how to perfect it intimately, because it operates with simplicity. If we were to choose gold and silver, we could hardly find a fire capable of acting on them. Although we know this fire, we cannot achieve perfect purification because of the power of their bonds and their natural harmony. So let us reject gold for the red elixir, silver for the white elixir. We will find a certain body, composed of sufficiently pure mercury and sulfur, on which nature will have done little work. We pride ourselves on perfecting such a body with our artificial fire and knowledge of the art. We will subject it to suitable cooking, purifying it, coloring it, and fixing it according to the rules of the art. It is therefore necessary to choose a matter which contains a pure mercury, clear, white and red, not completely perfect, mixed equally in the right proportions and according to the rules, with a sulfur similar to it. This matter must be coagulated into a solid mass, such that with the help of our science and prudence, we can succeed in purifying it intimately, perfecting it by our fire, and making it such that at the end of the work, it is thousands of times purer and more perfect than ordinary bodies cooked by natural heat. So be careful, For if you have exercised the subtlety and acuteness of your mind on these chapters where I have manifestly revealed to you the knowledge of matter, you now possess this thing, ineffable and delectable, object of all the desires of the philosophers. Chapter 4. How to regulate and maintain the fire. If your head is not too hard, if your mind is not completely shrouded in the veil of ignorance and unintelligence, I can believe that in the preceding chapters, you have found the true matter of the philosophers, the matter of the blessed stone of the wise, on which alchemy will operate with the aim of perfecting imperfect bodies, with the help of more than perfect bodies. Since nature offers us only perfect or imperfect bodies, we must indefinitely perfect the above-mentioned matter by our work. If we do not know how to operate, what is the cause other than the fact that we do not observe how nature daily perfects the metals? Do we not see that in the mines the coarse elements are so cooked and thickened by the constant heat existing in the mountains, that in time it is transformed into mercury? That the same heat and cooking transforms the fatty parts of the earth into sulfur? That this heat applied for a long time to these two principles engenders according to their purity or their impurity all the metals? Do we not see that nature produces and perfects all metals by cooking alone? I ask you all, who then compels you to want to do the same thing by means of bizarre and fantastic regimens? This is why a philosopher said, "Woe to you who want to surpass nature and make metals more than perfect by a new regimen, the fruit of your foolish stubbornness. God has given nature immutable laws, that is, she must act by continuous cooking, and you fools despise her or do not know how to imitate her." He also says, "Fire and azoth should be enough for you." And elsewhere, "Heat perfects everything, and you must cook and cook again, and never tire of it." And in another passage, "Let your fire be calm and gentle, let it remain so every day, always uniform, without weakening, otherwise great damage will ensue. Know that all our magisterium is made by cooking from one thing and in one way, and in one vessel. The work is similar to the creation of man. In infancy he is fed on light food, then when his bones have strengthened, the food becomes more fortifying. In the same way our magisterium is first subjected to a light fire with which we must always work during the cooking. But although we constantly speak of moderate fire, we nevertheless imply that in the regimen of the work, it must be increased little by little and by degree, until the end." Chapter 5. On the vessel and the furnace. We have just determined the way of operating. We are now going to speak of the vessel and the furnace, to say how and with what they must be made. When nature cooks the metals in the mines with the aid of natural fire, she can only do so by employing a proper cooking vessel. We propose to imitate nature in the regimen of fire, so let's imitate it also for the vessel. Let us examine the place where the metals are produced. We first see manifestly in a mine, that under the mountain there is fire, producing an even heat, the nature of which is to rise constantly. As it rises it dries up and coagulates the thick and coarse water contained in the bowels of the earth, and transforms it into mercury. The unctuous mineral parts of the earth are cooked, collected in the veins of the earth and flowing through the mountain, they engender sulfur. As can be observed in the veins of the mines, the sulfur born from the unctuous parts of the earth meets the mercury. Then the coagulation of the metallic water takes place. The heat continuing to act in the mountain, the various metals appear after a very long time. We observe in the mines a constant temperature. We can conclude that the mountain which contains the mines is perfectly closed on all sides by rocks, for if heat could escape, metals would never be born. If we wish to imitate nature, then we must have a furnace similar to a mine, not in size but in its particular layout, so that the fire placed at the bottom has no way of escaping when it rises, so that the heat is reverberated onto the carefully closed vessel containing the material of the stone. The vessel must be round with a small neck. It should be made of glass or an earth as resistant as glass. The opening should be hermetically sealed with a lid and bitumen. In mines fire is not in immediate contact with the matter of sulfur and mercury, which is separated from it by the earth of the mountain. In the same way, fire must not be applied naked to the vessel containing the matter, but this vessel must be placed in another closed vessel with the same care, so that equal heat acts on the matter, at the top and at the bottom, wherever necessary. This is why Aristotle says in The Light of Lights, that mercury must be cooked in a triple vessel made of very hard glass, or of an earth possessing the hardness of glass. Chapter 6. Accidental and essential colors that appear during the work. Having elected the matter of the stone, you know moreover the certain way of operating, you know with the help of which regimen one makes appear the various colors by cooking the stone. A philosopher said, "As many colors, as many names." For each new color appearing in the work, the alchemists invented a different name. Thus to the first operation of our stone, we gave the name of putrefaction, because our stone is then black. When you have found the blackness, says another philosopher, know that in this blackness hides the whiteness, and it must be extracted from it. After the putrefaction, the stone reddens, and it has been said about it. Often the stone reddens, yellows and liquefies, then coagulates before the true whiteness. It dissolves, putrefies, coagulates, mortifies, vivifies, blackens, whitens, adorns itself with red and white, all by itself. It can also turn green, for one philosopher said, "Cook until a green child appears, it is the soul of the stone." Another said, "Know that it is the soul that dominates during greenness." The colors of the peacock also appear before whiteness. A philosopher speaks about it in these terms: know that all the colors that exist in the universe, or that we can imagine, appear before whiteness, and only then does true whiteness appear. The body will be cooked until it becomes as bright as the eyes of fish, and then the stone will coagulate at the circumference. When you see the whiteness appear on the surface in the vessel, says a wise man, be certain that under this whiteness hides the red. You must extract it, therefore cook until everything is red. There is finally between the red and the white a certain ashy color, of which one said, after the whiteness, you cannot be mistaken any more, because by increasing the fire you will arrive at a grayish color. Do not despise the ashes, says a philosopher, because with the help of God, it will liquefy. And then finally, appears the king crowned with the red diadem, God willing. Chapter 7. How to make projection on imperfect metals. As I had promised, I treated until the end of our great work, our blessed magisterium, the preparation of the white and red elixirs. Now we are going to talk about how to make the projection, the complement of the work, eagerly awaited and desired. The red elixir yellows infinitely and transforms all metals into pure gold. The white elixir whitens infinitely and gives metals the perfect whiteness. But you should know that there are metals further from perfection than others, and conversely, there are some which are closer. Although all the metals are equally brought to perfection by the elixir, those which are close become perfect more quickly, more completely, more intimately than the others. When we find the nearest metal, we will discard all the others. I have already said which are the near and far metals and which is nearer to perfection. If you are sufficiently wise and intelligent, you will find it, in a preceding chapter, indicated without detour, determined with certainty. There is no doubt that he who has exercised his mind on this mirror will find by his work the true matter, and will know on which body it is advisable to make the projection of the elixir to arrive at perfection. Our precursors, who found everything in this art by their philosophy alone, show us sufficiently and without allegory the right path, when they say, nature contains nature, nature rejoices in nature, nature dominates nature and is transformed into other natures. Like draws near to like, for likeness is a cause of attraction. There are philosophers who have transmitted to us a remarkable secret on this point. Know that nature spreads rapidly in one's own body, whereas one cannot unite it with a foreign body. Thus the soul quickly penetrates the body which belongs to it, but it is in vain that you would like to make it enter another body. The similarity is quite striking. The bodies, in the work, become spiritual, and reciprocally the spirits become corporeal. The fixed body has therefore become spiritual. Now, as the elixir, red or white, has been taken beyond its nature, it is therefore not surprising that it is not miscible with molten metals, when we simply project it into them. It would thus be impossible to transmute 1,000 parts for one. So I'm going to let you in on a great and rare secret. Mix 1 part of elixir with 1,000 of the nearest metal, enclose the whole in a vessel suitable for the operation, seal it hermetically and place in a furnace to set. Heat slowly at first, gradually increasing the fire over 3 days until perfect union is achieved. This is the work of 3 days. You can then begin again to project a part of this product on 1,000 of next metal, and there will be transmutation. All you need for that is a day, an hour, a moment. Let us therefore praise our God, always admirable, in eternity.